and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors.
The Anarcho-Christian Podcast, evaluating the relationship between the Christian and the state.
Give us a king to rule us when you're gone. His life's work had been to help the people understand it's not the role of a man to rule over other men.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Now, as I'm recording this, I am still affected by what happened today during the sentencing trial for Amber Guyger. Now, I've chosen to release this with our normal episode release schedule, so this may be old news by the time this drops. But I think that's okay, because this is a bigger topic than just the recent news cycle. And maybe waiting a week or so will help keep this a discussion. So if you're not aware of what happened on October 2nd, Brandt Jean, the brother of Botham Jean, who was killed by Amber Guyger, delivered one of the most moving statements I've ever heard from a courtroom. And it wasn't just me. This was everywhere. It was extremely moving, and I listened to it a few times and honestly had trouble keeping my composure. So whether you heard this or not already, I'd like to play the close to 4-minute statement for you and then go over a few things that I think are very relevant to the anarcho-Christian discussion. But before I do, let's go over briefly what got us here. What was this trial about? On September 6th, 2018, an off-duty Dallas police officer named Amber Guyger entered Botham Jean's apartment, mistakenly believing it was her own, and shot and killed Botham. She said that she thought it was her apartment and he was a burglar. This, of course, went everywhere and set off everyone's spider senses. Immediately, it seemed like there had to be more to the story. Was this yet another event of police brutality, in Dallas, no less, a city that has a long history of police abuse? Was this a race thing, considering that Amber Guyger was a white cop and Botham was black? I'm not sure if there was another angle. I'm definitely not going to know looking at the outrage headlines hours after it happened. But I will say that I am, and was during the breaking of this event, completely fed up with two things. One, the continued and increasing murder of unarmed civilians from an increasingly militarized police force. And two, the continued unconditional support from conservatives and the religious right in support of police officers caught murdering or abusing unarmed civilians. This event was no exception. It brought out all the same lines from the Back the Blue types. I just get wound up thinking about it. So, Botham was shot in his own apartment, which she mistook for her own. He was watching TV, eating ice cream, when someone burst in and shoots him in the chest. It must have been terrifying for him, and should her story be true, maybe her too. Now, this case is a bit bizarre considering all the things that had to go wrong for her to enter his apartment completely believing it was her own. But I guess I'm not going to completely discount it. I'm not sure. I don't know. And I'm not going to dig into the trial too much here, but there are a few things we should go over. This trial brought up the ugly side of people and social media. Text and social media posts that definitely show, at best, a complete disregard for the seriousness of racism, or, at worst, outright racism from Guyger and her police partner. Which this infuriates me, to tell you the truth. I know how sarcastic text might get taken the wrong way sometimes, but we are talking about cops, the anointed protectors of society, the holy angels of God that keep the peace. Well, it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I know you've all seen the memes equating the blue with these images. And all the while, we have event after event of cops lying, abusing their authority, abusing their victims, planting evidence, targeting minorities. I could go on all day about this stuff. But here we are, a white cop in a city with a history of this behavior shoots an unarmed black man. The cynic in me thought early on, she is going to totally get off. And I was a little bit surprised that on October 1st of this year, that she was found guilty of murder. But it was the next day that really impacted me from this whole thing. Botham's brother Brandt delivered this statement.
I don't want to say twice or for the 100th time what you've or how much you've taken from us. I think you know that. But I hope you go to God with all the guilt, all the bad things you may have done in the past. Each and every one of us may have done something that we're not supposed to do. If you truly are sorry, I know I can speak for myself. I forgive you. And I know if you go to God and ask Him, He will forgive you. And I don't think anyone could say it. Again, I'm speaking for myself, not even behalf of my family. But I love you just like anyone else. And I'm not gonna say I hope you rot and die just like my brother did, but I personally want the best for you. And I wasn't gonna ever say this in front of my family or anyone, but I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you. Because I know that's exactly what Botham would want you to do. And the best would be give your life to Christ. I'm not gonna say anything else. I think giving your life to Christ would be the best thing that Botham would want you to do. Again, I love you as a person. And I don't wish anything bad on you. I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to let this play a little. He doesn't say anything else that we can hear, but I think he does say something to Amber Geiger as they hug. But listen just for a few more seconds to the emotional responses in the room as this is playing out. I don't know if you need a second to consider the weight of all that. This young man recently had his brother taken by this lady, and he just sat through court exposing comments from her that would be offensive to a black person. Yet he gives a statement full of such grace. I'm really at a loss for words, which is fine. His statement says it all. Now, this has been such a powerful moment for Christianity. It's happened before, but it's not often. It's definitely something Christian anarchism can keep looking to. See, this concept of grace and forgiveness and mercy aren't foreign to Christianity in our words, but politically and legally, which this has been both, they are distant and overlooked. In fact, this situation right here is one that is tirelessly theorized. And here it is, played out in real life. What would you do if someone killed your family member? So, justice is something we desire. It's natural. There is right and wrong. There's crime and the sense that justice should be done. And really, that's the whole thing behind grace. It is kindness to the undeserving. It's not that someone just gets a little extra love from you. Maybe they're feeling down and you want to make them feel better, or maybe they just messed up just a little bit. No, they do not deserve your mercy, love, and grace because they stole from you, they hurt you, or they killed your family member. And this is a little frustrating because I'm looking at social media responses to Brandt's statement, and some people are really upset that this might lead to more excusing of police crimes in the future. And I understand that. But that doesn't matter because what Brandt did was Christ-like. And it is what we are called to do. Here are just a few of the many verses that tell us that this is what a Christian should be doing. Ephesians 4:31 and 32. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. Mark 11:25 says, and whenever you stand praying, forgive, if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also who is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. Colossians 3:13, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. Matthew 6:12, from the Lord's Prayer, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And this is all based on reflecting the same love and grace God has shown us. I went over this in an episode on the death penalty. It's episode 37 if you want to check that out. But again, this grace is shown to the undeserving. People that not only don't deserve this mercy, but deserve far worse. We deserve justice. As Paul says in Romans, the wages of sin is death. And we are all sinners deserving of death. Yet, we are shown grace. We are to love our enemies. I think this concept gets reduced down to forgiving someone that cut in line at McDonald's and you didn't say anything, or something trivial like that. But I nearly lost it when Brandt told her that he loved her. I don't know. I can't think of much more to say about that other than, unfortunately, this will be looked at as a great moment, but it likely won't be used as an example for us to imitate or a standard to hold ourselves to. I know it's hard, and I haven't had to forgive something like this. But these aren't just words meant to be written in a pretty font on a picture or a coffee cup or something like that. These are the characteristics of a Christian. So another concept does come to mind, and it will lead me to another point in this whole discussion. In Romans, 1 Thessalonians, and 1 Peter, we see the instruction, do not repay evil for evil. I'll go through those three quickly, but I recommend that anyone unfamiliar with them spend some time thinking on what it means and how it applies to real-life tragedies. 1 Peter 3:9, do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless, for this you are called, that you may obtain a blessing. 1 Thessalonians 5:15, see that no one repays anyone evil for evil, but always seek to do good to one another and to everyone. And Romans 12:17 through 21. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing so you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So, is this what Brandt did with his statement about forgiveness? The thing is, and this again goes back to the episode on the death penalty, our rightful sense of justice will seem to conflict with these statements, to forgive our enemies, to love our enemies, and vengeance is God's. Even without Brandt's remarks, we are already looking at a sentence that everyone thinks is light. In a very real hypothetical, if Botham would have accidentally walked into her apartment and the same story ensued, he would be looking at life or the death penalty. The outrage from the Blue Line supporters, already poised to excuse, would be pushing for no excuses and telling us that this was part of a war on our police. The hypocrisy is undeniable. So how long is just the right amount of prison time? The entire idea of prison needs to be addressed here. This is not only referring to reform, but also reconciling this to our stateless philosophy. Prison, too many times, is a way to seek vengeance or repay evil. Lock them up in a cage. Yeah, they deserved to rot in a cell. You've all heard it, and you've probably even said it before. All the while, the state upholds the sentencing. The crony politicians and their private enterprise buddies profit off of the prisoners. As well, you're paying for them to sit in these cells with your tax dollars. So what is prison doing? In one way, you could see it as keeping extremely dangerous people off the streets. But with the vast majority of people in prison for victimless crimes, it's more like state-enforced morality improvement. This is a very immature and lazy way to look at it. But it's a common assumption. A major part in fixing the prison system would be fixing ourselves when it comes to this. Prison will not fix morals. There have been some feel-good stories about people using opportunities behind bars to pull themselves up and have a successful life once they get out, but it's far from the norm. Recidivism rates and criminal behavior behind bars are higher than any amount of feel-good stories that happen in spite of that person's experience, not because of it. But the others, the criminals that aren't serial killers but have stolen someone's life, liberty, and property, what are they doing? When we do start looking at what makes a crime, the loss of personal property, we start to look at the correctional stuff very differently. This case with Botham Jean and Amber Geiger fits here. Her sentence of 10 years offends most of us and our sense of justice because we've established long prison sentences as a punishment that measures justice. Yet the whole time, what do the victims get? If they are totally bought into this, they might feel like they can achieve their vengeance with proportionately long prison sentences. But are we actually achieving anything? Talking about the criminal subculture in prison and the recidivism rates, it's easy to see that we are not. So let's get back to this idea of property and repaying a victim for their loss of property. More specifically, what is personal property? Our sense of property is directly related to the natural rights theory of John Locke, and I already mentioned it as life, liberty, and property. So it isn't that a person is property of another, which is slavery, but that you have self-ownership. This is why you should be compensated if your person is harmed, and not only if your belongings are taken. I don't have a rate established in my head for every violation. Some will say that it should be a monetary value plus X% for the troubles. And how much is the loss of a brother worth? I can't answer that. But I am confident that a society without the short-sighted dependence of the state's vengeance will establish it. Bringing this back to Geiger, she doesn't owe me, and she doesn't owe the state. She owes Botham's immediate family. And really, that's it. Now, getting further into this stateless legal theory will take us into her maybe owing the apartment complex and the courts or insurance for these sorts of things. But the overall point remains is that we are arguing about completely unrelated people to us and what they need to serve to the state, while their victims get nothing. Or to add insult and injury, physical or financial, the victim will pay taxes for the perpetrator to be locked up. So these are some difficult questions and complex issues. It's easy to make assumptions about what we should do or what we would do, but it may be another thing entirely if we were faced with it. I hope this moment is used by the Holy Spirit to change hearts. Remember, even figures within our faith were murderers. Paul comes to mind immediately. Paul had Christians killed before he was stopped on the way to Damascus, which he was likely headed out on that journey to kill more Christians. But Jesus had mercy and changed his heart. He didn't get what he deserved. So yeah, she's probably not getting what she deserves with a 10-year sentence that she probably won't even complete. But if it were up to Brandt, she wouldn't serve any of it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Anarcho-Christian podcast on whatever podcatcher you're using. If you're not sure where to find us, visit anarchochristian.com/subscribe. There you'll find links to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Android, Google Play, and YouTube. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider letting us know by leaving a 5-star rating and review on iTunes or wherever you catch the episodes. Also, like and share the episode on Facebook or the other social media sites. You can support the show with a monthly donation through Patreon. Thank you, Jesse, for becoming our newest patron. Visit the support tab on anarchochristian.com. That will take you to our Patreon page where you'll find a few ways that you can support us. And thank you again, Jesse, for your financial support. So I think that's it for today. Grace and peace, no king but Christ.
He cried out to God, won't you help them to believe? This power is illusion, the need to rule is greed. Your love and your light is really all they need. It's really all we need.
Thank you for listening to the Anarcho-Christian Podcast. Subscribe to our email notifications at anarchochristian.com, like us on facebook.com/anarchochristian, and follow us on Twitter at anarchoxp. Subscribe to our podcast and YouTube to join us next time as we continue to evaluate the relationship between the Christian and the state. No king but Christ.
This has been a Pax Libertas Productions podcast.